Hey, we're live. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everybody. Good evening. Welcome to our Rumbidzai show live today from Coventry. And we are talking today about the death of George Floyd and the subsequent riots, which have been all over the world, in the United States, in the UK, in Australia, all over Europe, and the effects and the ripple effects of what has been happening across the pond in America. My name is Rumbi, and I'm just going to wait for people to join on. Please invite people to come on. We've got some guests who are coming on who are going to be talking about their experiences and coming up with some solutions. We've also got a superintendent here from the police force in Northampton. So that would be great to get the perspective from the police and the public disorder and all the stuff that's been happening. It's been totally something else. So please invite your friends, come and join us, and let's just talk and hear your views as well, and hear from you guys what you've experienced, what you think about all this racism. Is it really there? Are people affected? Has the struggle been hijacked? I think some people have been saying this Black Lives Matters movement has been hijacked by people with other agendas. What are your thoughts? What are your experiences? What have you been going through? We want to hear from you. We want to talk about it and hear what the community is saying, what people are saying, what people are experiencing. I'm going to start off by inviting a young lady on who's just going to talk about her own experience as a young British, a Zimbrit, a child of migrants who has lived in the UK ever since she's been born. She was born here, but has experienced, racism in school and just in the society, and we want to hear from her. And that's Tasha. And Hazel is also going to join us. They're going to come on and join me, and we're just going to talk to them and hear their experiences as young people living in the United Kingdom, and hear what they've gone through and what they've experienced, and get their views. So I'm just going to add them on, and I do hope that this will work. Yay, it's worked. Hi, Tasha. I'm going to now add Hazel on. Woo, yes, perfect. It's worked. Hi, Hazel. You're in Cardiff, aren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, oh, that's great. Thank you for coming on. And hello, Tasha, in the next room. Hi. So, guys, I want you. Can you just tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, where you were born, how long you've lived in the UK, and just your experience of, have you experienced racism, and what are your thoughts? I just want to hear from you. I don't want to ask you lots of questions, but I would love to just hear your thoughts about the movement, Black Lives Matters, your thoughts about racism, and your experiences, because I know you've got a lot of opinions. So I'll start with Tasha and then Hazel.
Okay, so my name's Tasha and I'm 14 years old and I've lived in England for 14 years. And I think I've experienced a little bit of racism in school. I don't think it was intentional, but especially from teachers, like not picking up, picking for questions and almost just overlooking you and picking other people. I don't think it's intentional, but I feel like they do. And also some of my peers, especially like boys, like my brother, kind of certain haircuts, whereas white people or their white peers can. So I feel like that's a little bit of racism that I've experienced or seen in my school.
Okay, so have you ever been targeted at all by anyone?
As in my friends or teachers?
Anyone, teachers?
I think in one of my classes, some of my teachers just ignore me and just they look into my eyes and then they just ignore me and don't like ask me questions or allow me to answer any questions. And I've been like whole lessons without being able to answer a question. But I'm not sure. I feel like it's inspired by racism, but they're not doing it on purpose.
Okay. So like it's just biased towards you perhaps without
Yeah.
pinpointing you. Okay. And what about you, Hazel? What's been your experience? You're at university now, isn't it? Yeah.
So I was born in Zimbabwe and moved to England maybe when I was about 3. I've lived in quite a few houses and quite a few different places and went to quite a few schools, all of which were majoritively white. I was always kind of like the only black girl. And very recently, because of the Black Lives Matter movement, I've been thinking a lot about my experience growing up. Just a lot of fascination with me being different is what I realised the most, especially my hair, extensions, natural hair. My mother said that when I was very young, I came home once and asked to have blonde hair because teachers and other students obviously speak a lot about blonde hair, blue eyes is the norm, the beautiful look. Obviously, I was the only black girl, so I really think that growing up around a lot of white people, we're in a system of oppression to black people. I started to maybe not hate myself, but not appreciate the full excellence of being black. So yeah.
Yeah. And so it was more so for you, from what you've said, you felt you were different and you felt that you didn't your identity was affected because you didn't look like others. And what about your experience from others, from other people? Because there's a lot of talk in media or social media that people in England. I've seen some of the placards saying that you're not innocent, England. But is there overt racism that you've experienced at all?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of the stuff growing up was just kind of stupid questions from white people about, like, one girl asked me once, because I'm black, do I like, sorry if it's too much, do I have white poos? And it's just that kind of mindset that people genuinely think we're very much different, more than just the colour of our skin, that our insides work differently. I feel like in situations where me and a group of friends might be, I don't know, playing up a little bit, the blame is always shifted towards me, or it's very easy for people to take anger out on me.
On you.
Yeah, there's been a lot of situations where I have 100% not being in the wrong. I can admit when I'm wrong, but I just feel like people like to take anger out on me, or they explain things easier if I am the main culprit of things. And I do think that's down to my race and maybe a bit of my personality as well, because I am a little bit outspoken, but I'm also black. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So it's also, and I think that extends then to, like you've said, you get blamed for things. And I think we'll talk to the police a little bit about that, because there's a lot more of black boys mostly being stopped and searched. Not so much with the girls, but with the boys, that they're suspected of being the criminals or the drug dealers because of their color. And that's something that you experience perhaps, but in a way that you're saying you just get picked on and you get blamed for things because of your color and your personality as well. And I think something that you've said about hair, Tasha, you had that same experience as well.
Yeah, like people asking, can I touch your hair and stuff like that, and just being really like interested about it, and then just like ask, and also about asking really weird questions, like do you wear sunscreen, or like do you burn in the sun, just stuff like that.
But that's just curiosity, isn't it? Is that racism, or it's just someone just being curious because we're different? So we're just a different race. We look different. We've got different hair. We change our hair. I've got a wig, a curly, straight. I've got natural hair tomorrow, and that's just who we are. We are different from some people who never have seen a black person. They've only had white people. So would you guys say that's racism, or it's just curiosity?
I think it would probably be ignorance.
Ignorance. Okay.
Yeah. And it depends on also how they ask the question. If they're asking out of genuine curiosity and you're friends with that person, of course it's fine. But I've been in situations where some girls have tried to ask me questions that kind of embarrass me in front of a lot of people. I experienced that first day of year 7, actually. I remember some girl asked me how I washed my hair because I had cornrows in. So just stuff like that, I guess.
Yeah. And what about the movement? So before we go off, because I just wanted to get your opinion about your experiences from younger people. And we're going to speak to some people who are a bit older as well and hear their experiences in university, in workplaces. What about your experience with the riots and they didn't start as riots, they're protests and a movement which developed into riots in some areas. What do you think about the whole movement? What are your thoughts on that? Do you support it, Tasha?
Personally, I support the protest, but not so much the rioting. Because I feel like I understand where they're coming from and the anger that they have, but I feel like going around and like bombing and like wrecking people's businesses that they've worked hard for isn't fair. Because I saw a video of this man who had worked really hard and he started off poor, and in the rioting they just came and wrecked his business, stole loads of stuff, and he just started from square one because he has nothing now. I don't agree with that because I don't think it's fair. But I do understand where they're coming from. But I do agree with the protesting, and especially the taking down of the statues of the white people who colonized Africa. I agree with that. I do not agree with them being put up. I would like them all to be taken down.
So for all the slave traders and the colonizers?
All of them, yeah.
Yeah. And do you know anything about those people? Have you learned about it in history? Do you know about what happened with colonization of Africa?
Yeah, they called like the Scrabble for Africa, which I just think it's just rude, like calling it a Scrabble, because like people live there, that's their home, and you can't just go and take that from people, take everything that they've earned, they've worked for, just because of their skin color, and you can't just look down upon them. So yeah, we've learned about it in history about the Scrabble for Africa.
Okay, all right. So that's good. That's your view. And what about you, Hazel? Do you support it, the movement? What do you think?
Personally, I'm 100% behind the movement. Obviously, it's not nice, some of the riots or destroying of businesses taking place, but every big war or movement has its collateral damage, and I think it's for the greater good, 100%. And I feel like people are finally listening properly this time, and it's going to take some anger and violence for the important people to actually pay attention and do something about it. So yeah, I'm happy about it, to be honest.
Okay, did you go and take part?
I couldn't because of circumstances, but I wish I could, and I think there might be a few more coming up. So yeah.
What about social distancing and the coronavirus?
I feel like it's easy to talk about social distancing now when it's a Black Lives Matter protest, but there's been so many other instances that there's been large groups gathering, especially white people. There's been beaches packed since the beginning of lockdown. V-Day, Veteran Day for the war, had neighbours all close together, and now it's something important. A lot of people want to talk about social distancing. I think that obviously people should be aware of it, but people are hurt, and there's a big issue being spoken about, and I'm okay with it.
Okay, that's great. Thank you for your views and coming on and talking about it. It's just good to hear from young people what you guys are thinking, because you are so militant, and most of the protests are from people who are the younger generation, who are very passionate about this issue. I think for us as older generation, we've lived with it. We've lived in yeah, we were born when Zimbabwe, I was born in Zimbabwe, it was still colonized. I've lived through independence. I've lived through the decline of our economy, wrecked by our own people. I've seen two different sides, and I've come here and experienced discrimination and racism overtly. And I've experienced that, and I'm just reading the comments as well from Rob, from your dad, Hazel. He says 95% of protesters are white. So where are the black people?
Them figures are, as of recent, the past few days, and a lot of the criticism against the protesters before these figures were kind of targeted to black people by kind of racists. So I think that's a good point, absolutely, that they're all white. But
yeah, and I think it's good actually that I don't know if the white protesters are the ones who are causing the damage and destroying, trying to cause to wreck like the protests. But the fact that they're coming to stand together in unity shows that perhaps the younger people are tired of this, and the young white people are also tired of it, and they're tired of the discrimination. I don't know, so that's why they could be standing with their black counterparts, with their friends, with their colleagues, and trying to also make a difference, because everyone's just had enough of it from the older establishment, perhaps. But that's interesting to see that the majority of protesters, there are a lot of white faces, even when you see it on the news. There are a lot of people. So that's interesting to see. Do you have any other comments that you want to talk just to say before you head off? And we have Rumbi and Dalitso and Benjamin.
Maybe one thing you mentioned about getting taught about colonizers, and it just made me think how Black history is not taught in schools whatsoever, and I think that's the big problem that needs to be changed, personally.
So will you learn about European history, American history, but you don't get taught about African history?
Yeah.
Okay, so
not even America. Yeah, World War II and stuff.
Yeah, and that could be something for you guys to take up in terms of reforming education and putting forward what you want to hear, because you have to speak. I think what you've said before, Hazel, is that people are finally listening, and whilst they're listening, it's important for your voices to be heard and for you not to be afraid and to speak up, even in school, and tell them about the curriculum, that it needs to be changed. And we believe that we need to learn about our history and learn more about that. So that's important for you guys to also take that up and speak, because you are speaking, which is really commendable for you to speak up, and you've got a voice and you're using it, which is great. And you can use it in different ways. And I think we're going to hear about that, alternatives to protesting and other ways as well that you can effect change from Benjamin and Rumbi. So that's great. So thank you for that. And we'll probably have more conversations, and we'll see you on Twitter, because I know you guys are always tweeting and educating people, which is really important for you to educate on Twitter, because the battles are on the ground, but also online. I think you face a lot of battles online as well, don't you? Yeah. Great. Oh, thank you so much for coming on. And I'm going to ask you guys to head down, and I'm just going to add some more people.
Bye.
Bye. Press where it says
bye.
Bye-bye. Yay, great. So that's great. That's interesting to hear from the young people. 14-year-old Tasha, and Hazel is I think 21 at university, and they've got different opinions as well that they have experienced. So I've got here with me Rumbi and Dalitso and Benjamin. I'll ask you guys just to introduce yourselves and what you do, because you've got really great, you guys are doing fantastic work. And I'd love for you to talk about it, because it's great work that you're doing in the community with the young people, raising issues of discrimination. And so I'll leave Rumbi, my namesake, to introduce yourself first, and we'll go ladies first, Benjamin.
Hello, everybody. My name is Rumbi Mukoyi. I am the founder of African Youth Arise, and I'm also a HR professional for a logistics company, for a global logistics company. African Youth Arise is all about empowering young people of African descent that are based in the UK. It was formed in 2013 after the riots or protests, I call them protests, after Mark Dagenham was killed. And it was after my brother had experienced, he had a bad experience with the police. He was just coming out the house, a crime had been committed in my very white neighborhood, and he was stopped by the police, and apparently he fitted the description of someone who had committed a crime. It was only for my very humanly white neighbor who stood up for him to say, actually, it's not him, that's my neighbor's son. Why have you got him? And I just thought to myself, I saw a lot of young people were rioting. They were really angry at the time in 2011. And I thought, actually, if I don't do something about this anger and this energy and this passion that I'm seeing in my brother, no one is going to do it. We need to divert this energy. And that was the birth of African Youth Arise. So we deliver workshops. Currently, we're delivering them every week online because there's so much need for us to equip and empower our young people. We deliver financial literacy, because we need to equip ourselves financially as well, because some of the issues that we're facing, they are because of our financial status. We deliver decision making. I solely believe in giving young people the information that they need to enable them to make the right decisions and to have a choice. We've got a variety. I'll leave Delito to talk about more of the work that we're doing.
Hi guys, so my name is Litso Tembo, and by day I've got a legal background, so I work as an independent sexual violence advocate, and then normally on weekends I volunteer for African Youth Arise. And like Rumbi said, it's all about equipping our young African people so that they have the skills and the knowledge that they need to go out there into the real world. And some of the workshops that we do, so we had 2 this weekend on Sunday on their civil rights. And we just educated them on, because I think something we forget as adults is that as much as we can have conversations amongst ourselves, most of these kids, it's sort of, they bottle their emotions in. They don't have that space to talk about how they're feeling. So it was just a good space for them to just, share how they're feeling, ask the questions that a lot of them have. For example, some of them were scared about going outside, scared of the police, or not knowing what their rights are in general. So that's what the workshops are mainly about. I think we've done that a number of times as well, just giving them space, I think as well, just to talk about, things they do at school, career options, and learning from each of the mentors, because we all have different career backgrounds as well. So that's the space that we offer with them too.
That's great. You guys are doing a great job. Wonderful. And Benjamin?
Yes, hello. Thank you for having me, Rumbi. I'm Benjamin Hamandisha from Active Horizons, and we're an organization that focuses on empowering young people from the BAME community. They're based in London, but as of late, we recently ventured into online programs and digital programs, which I'm in charge of. So facilitating seminars, workshops, and etc. around careers, career progression, leadership, and we've got a lot of leadership programs we've got coming up in the next couple of weeks, leadership in the media, leadership in politics, and civil society as well. Outside of Active Horizons, I'm a member of Citizens UK, a national civic organization. I also run my own youth organization called Emerge now, and I'm also a youth leader within my church, AFM.
Okay, wow, that's great. So you're really involved with the young people.
Yes.
What have you felt from them since this Black Matters, the Black Lives Matter movement started after after George Floyd's death? What have you? What's the mood like? What are they saying to you? What are you hearing from them?
Me or Rumbi?
Yeah, Benjamin.
Yeah. So there's definitely a very widespread anger, as we should. People are very emotional. Some people, including myself, at some point I felt helpless. When you think about it, because I was thinking it's been almost 60 years since the civil rights movement had been successful in changing some laws, and we're back in the same cycle of protesting and marching. So it's a mixed bag of emotions, helpless. Some people are feeling motivated and passionate to even act more. So yeah, it's mixed emotions.
It's mixed emotions. So some are feeling helpless, some are feeling more
passionate,
energized and passionate to do more. That's great. And what are your thoughts, Dalito, about just this whole issue of racism? And from all of you, have you guys experienced it personally? What's been your experience? Or in your work, have you experienced people who have been victims of perhaps race crime, hate crime, or being stopped by the police excessively? What's been your experience? Anyone really, or Dalito, and then Rumbi and Benjamin, just fire away.
I think when we think about America and everything that's going on, I think in America the racism is more direct. I think a word that you used earlier when the girls were talking was just like, isn't it just curiosity? And I think that's the general perception, like, oh, it's not racism, it's curiosity. But in the UK, it's more institutional and indirect. And it's like subtle little comments of, I remember speaking at a work event a few years ago. I think it wasn't a work experience event. And a lady approached me after and she was like, oh, you're so well spoken for a Black girl. And like, it's innocent in that moment, but it's sort of that thing of like, am I not allowed to be well spoken because of the color of my skin? Or just like conversations with people and saying, why is your nose like that? And I think that was like my first encounter of like discrimination and people laughing at you at school and thinking, but my mom's nose is like that, my dad's nose is like that. And you start to hate yourself because of what other people are saying. And I think an example that I'd give, I think there was a time I was picking up my younger cousin from the train station and she was late. And I was panicking thinking, oh, where is she? And then finally she turned up and she was like, oh, I'm so sorry, I couldn't call you. My friend and I were being stopped and searched. So this is a 14-year-old girl. When I asked her to say, oh, did they explain to you why you were stopped and searched? She said, oh, he assumed that we saw something off the train. And for a young girl, it's scary. Like, there's a lot of confusion. Like, I'm just going to meet someone to pick me up. Like, I haven't done anything wrong. Like, we're just friends. And I think in that encounter, because she was Black and her friend was white, she experienced more like, let's say, I'll call it harassment in a way from the police. In that to say, what are you doing? What's in your bag? I need to look into your bag. And like, I think something that I sensed a lot from the young people on Sunday was there's a lot of confusion in that the law is one thing, but then why is it I'm going on social media and I'm seeing that you're telling me that they can't stop and search me because of the color of my skin, but then why is it that it's happening? Why is it that people that have the same color as me, like, are dying? Why is it that you're telling me that only a woman can stop and search a woman, like a female officer? Like, I can't be stopped and searched by a male officer, but then the cousin that I'm referring to, the person that stopped and searched her was a male officer and she's a little girl. It's sort of that thing of the laws flipped according to what you look like and who you are. And if you don't have that knowledge, like what we're trying to do, equipping the young people, you won't think it's an issue and you just keep quiet and keep moving. And I think that's what to become the norm amongst like the diaspora community, and like there's a lot that happens, but you're told to be like, this is not our country, don't say too much, that's just
tell you that.
exactly, like, don't say too much, like, just ignore it, like that's what happens. And I think we're building a generation that's slowly being taught to accept like the discrimination, the institutional racism, and nothing is really being done about it.
That's great. And you've really put some great points there. You've talked about institutionalized racism. You've talked about how the law applies for one person differently to another person, and how it's applied differently, and subtle remarks, like you've said, about your appearance. And I think that's something that Salim mentioned. He said, I assume it's a manifestation of racism in the form of curiosity due to whiteness, the straight nose, the long blonde hair being perceived and taught as normal, and the average for everything to be compared against. So that's really true that Black girls then and boys then end up having a lot of identity issues and body image issues, feeling inferior because of things, of subtle comments like that people think are okay to make them, but they're not okay, because of the effect that it has on people. So thank you for that. Yeah. And Benjamin, just from you, just generally, same vein in terms of experiences, but perhaps more from Black boys. What's been your experience, and also from others that you've met?
Yeah, so mine hasn't really been in the corporate world because I'm not working. I'm still a university student, but I've got one good example. One time, I think I was in A level, and I was going for a Citizens UK meeting, and it was happening at a school in Greenwood, London. And I attended the meeting, as I always did, in my formal suit and tie. And the caretaker of that place, when I went there asking for the room where our meeting was going to be, he said, "Oh, looking sharp today. Are we coming from court or a funeral?" Like his expectation was the only time Black men should be wearing formal suits and ties is if you're either going to court for a crime you committed or funeral, to bury people you've killed, etc. So that was one over it. Another example I had was when I moved back from Zimbabwe coming for A level after my IGCSEs or O levels. I wanted to attend a grammar school in my area in Slough, and one of them was a predominantly white grammar school. And I had all the qualifications because at that time, IGCSE was considered to be a bit more tougher than GCSE. So I had all the A stars that they wanted, but they still denied me a place. They said that, no, we can't offer you a place right now. We have to wait for our students to come in first. But every other grammar school offered me, and I ended up going to a predominantly Asian grammar school. So that's been my experience.
What that you wanted to go to was predominantly white?
Yes. Oh. And they denied me.
Wow, qualified. And that's the institutionalized racism, isn't it? Where
yes,
discrimination based on your name. My name, Funzawabaya, has caused me so much trouble because people think it's okay to just say, "Oh, I can't say your name," and they don't even try.
Yeah.
Or someone at work, when I worked, they said to me, "Why don't you just change your name? Why don't you call yourself Smith or something so that it's easier for us to pronounce?" And they joke, but it's not. And
it's very offensive. Very offensive.
Yeah, very offensive. But I think we were taught not to ruffle feathers. So I would just smile. And for me, when I had that experience, I just left it. But my manager is the one who then took it further and banned that client from actually contacting the organization I was working for at that time, a long time ago. But it's it's things like that, your name and things like that. And what about Rumbi as well in work? Because you're in HR, aren't you? What's been
I am, yeah. I mean, I've got a varied experience in the corporate world, public and private sector. At some point, I was leading about 250 young people on a summer program. I was the highest person in authority on that program. There was an incident with a young person in regards to their behavior. So I followed the disciplinary procedure, contacted the parents, and the parents responded, "Hello, who's this?" And I explained who I was. And they said, "Can I please, if you're going to talk about my son, can I please speak to the manager?" And I said, "I am the manager." And she just didn't know what to do. And just because I sounded differently, it didn't mean that I was not capable of being a manager. So my accent doesn't really determine my capabilities. So, those are some of the issues that we face. I mean, I see on boards, I see in the boardroom, and normally I'm probably the only Black person or the only female in the room. And you know, sometimes, you know what Tasha was saying, I always say this, you know, the behavior that you see at school, you will definitely see in the workplace, because it's just in a different sort of environment. But that kind of behavior, when people see through you, they don't contact you, they don't give you eye contact, they pretend as if you don't exist, that is still in our boardrooms. But then again, we still have organizations talking about equality and diversity. Well, sometimes it just doesn't feel like it. And that's why I think we're seeing all these protests, you know, across the world, because we are just tired of it.
And people are tired, and you guys are quite brave. And I think something that Fazai has said is, I think as African parents, we have a role to play in minimizing racism and discrimination. And this may be due to not wanting to ruffle feathers or cause problems. And I think that's the thing, that for us, we as parents, we've been settling here. We've been trying to get your papers, get you guys sorted. And there's no, you know, it's like we think if we cause trouble, we could get kicked out of this country. It's not our. But you guys have got more of a sense of perhaps belonging, and you are more settled, and that's why you guys have to take the baton to speak, and you have to be able to articulate these things. I think because we've had our heads buried in the sand, just sorting out migrating. It's been bad enough, and a lot of things we've let them go. One of the things that I just someone spoke about up there is the immigration charges. The charges for immigrants to make an application to live in this country are astronomical. There is no other application that costs as much as an immigration application. And it's a paper application that takes minutes to decide. It doesn't take even an hour, but you are being charged £1,000 per person. So families are paying like £10,000 to renew a visa to stay. And those are some of the things where there's clear discrimination. Because to make any other application, it doesn't cost as much, which is much more work. But because it's immigrants, we don't care about them really. You know, just find the money or go back to where you came from. That's the type of attitude that's been there. And even the letters that we read at work when they're rejecting applications for people, it's horrendous in terms of the clear racism that's there. The laws themselves are laws which are made with race in mind. I mean, each country has a duty to protect its borders, to have laws and to govern, but it's the spirit that's behind some of these laws, which is clearly discriminatory and causes so much damage. And we do speak out, we do try, but I think sometimes it takes protests for people to hear, because you can go through the courts, you can try and speak in a language that they understand, but sometimes it takes people who are brave enough to go out into the street and speak and obey the law, not break the law, but still protest. So it's good. What is your view about protests? And do you guys, what do you think? Do you think it's an effective way of bringing change, or do you think there could be another way that the change could come?
Yes, I think there is a place for protests. There's in every campaign there's a place for protest. However, I think Benjamin will talk more about going beyond the protest, because after we can't protest every day. We have to be realistic. We can't protest every day. So what we've tried to do at African Youth Arise is to get in touch with the organizations that we are influential in, that we partner with, so that we form consortiums that understands structures that really understand the issues in our communities, the issues that our young people are facing. So, for example, I sit on the IAG. It's a police sort of like community organized body, and I've got the opportunity to speak what's going on in my community. And when the riots were starting, my mind just took me to 2011, if I'm honest. I thought, actually, I'm so passionate about the young people that we work with. And my team actually was laughing at me because, I wasn't sleeping very well last week. And I just said, what should we do? And we came together with a plan and said, actually, let's contact other organizations that are really good at policy change. So that's Active Horizons. So that's why we started partnering with Active Horizons, because they've got speciality and expertise in that area. We are more on empowering and equipping in a different manner. So obviously, we have to recognize that we don't have all the skill sets that we require. And the protests are, yes, they're highlighting the issue, but there's something that has to be beyond that. So I'll leave Delito to speak more around the work that we did over the weekend.
So over the weekend, we had the citizens' rights workshop. I think someone commented about we need to have more of that. And the basis of the workshop itself, but I've got a law degree, so it was just implementing something that I already know to equip them. So we talked about, the protest itself and the different ways and methods of protesting. I remember someone spoke about, if you're working, writing an email or a letter to your employer just to say, what are we doing to make a difference? And I think, protesting is all good and well, but like Rumbi said, we can't do that every day. And I think there's been phases when the Black Lives Matter movement has started up and then things die down and then we're quiet again. I think it's about finding solutions and continuing the conversations past, this month. So I've been seeing petitions going around. So we're just telling the young people you can sign up a petition. For example, with the Justice for Belly Mujinga petition that's going around, I know that there was a template that was sent around and sending an email to your mayor or the MP in your area. And I actually got a response today of what, the Mayor of London responded and said, this is what we're planning on doing. Thank you so much for sending that to me. And I think it's people are now feeling more confident to speak up than before. And I think it's a positive change that we're seeing, though it's slow, it is a change. And even just talking with the young people, I think the pressure to go out and protest is very much evident. But it's about realizing that just because, your friend feels able to go protest, your circumstances or your situation might be different. For some people, they're living with people that are high risk. So if you go out and protest, you're risking your family member from catching coronavirus even more. Or you might just not feel safe to go out and do it. Like the point Rumbi said, or just that thought of, taking you back to the riots and thinking, will that happen again? So I think the first thing that I've been saying to everyone is rather than following peer pressure, do what you feel able to do. If you just feel able to write a tweet about it, that's okay. If you just feel able, to take a break from social media for a bit, that's totally okay as well. So it's finding a balance on assessing yourself, even as an adult, to say, I don't feel able to watch the news constantly because it's making me feel some type of way about the colleagues that I work with, or it's adding the pressure and the anxiety, because I think we fail to realize that in watching the videos and everything, we're experiencing further trauma than the personal trauma that we're experiencing as well, in our own lives. So so it's about finding the best way to protest. So protesting is about speaking up and raising your voice, but you can raise it in different ways. Even if it's just talking to a colleague and they're saying, what are your thoughts on the Black Lives Matter movement? I think I had a conversation with one colleague and she was like, oh, but I don't see color. So how can you say that I'm a racist? Or how can say that there's racism out there? So it's in that conversation that she actually realized wait, there is a problem. And she actually asked me and say, what can I do to make a difference? And I said, you're seeing the petitions around, you can sign one of them. You don't have to put up a live or, put a video up to say, I'm not a racist and this is what I do. But it's just starting the dialogue and going from there. And the more we talk about it with people, obviously, I'm a big believer, don't fight hate with hate. Talking to people on a level and showing them the love that you want to receive in a way, and bringing positive change through that.
Bringing positive change through dialogue, through one-to-one dialogue with colleagues, with people that you meet at work, influencing policy, participating in policy. Maureen has said, occupying leadership, standing for parliament, for council, for local council, local government, standing in those positions so that you can have a voice, because we need to be able to participate in decision making and changing the issues on the agenda. So even for young people, especially the young people who have now you have the right to stand in parliament. You have the right to go and stand up for positions and to influence policy. And I wanted to just bring on Dennis Murray, who's a superintendent in the Northampton Police Force. I'm going to bring him on so that we can have some conversations with him, and you guys can ask some questions, and we can just find out more about the role that the police play, and your experiences as well, and what they can do to help us, to help the community as well. So I'm just going to bring him on.
Hi everybody, how you doing?
Hi, thank you so much for waiting in the
That's okay.
waiting to come on. Thank you so much for taking the time to come out of hours to come and have a chat with us.
I'm really glad to be here to answer any questions and discuss this in any way that I can with anybody.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's great. So I think we've had some issues that have been raised from I think it was Rumbi who mentioned, and Daliso mentioned as well, about stop and search. And we've seen some videos going around where people were becoming quite emotive, where there was a black young man who was handcuffed and a white boy who wasn't handcuffed, and they talked about how the law is applied to people differently. Could you explain what the policy is and what what the police are taught, or what they're taught to do? Why is it that happens in practice?
Certainly. So I am the Northamptonshire Police lead for stop and search. So
Okay.
part of my role is to reform the way we do things and make sure that it's representative of the community's concerns. So I work with James Andronoff, who's the Assistant Chief Constable, and we're both working on that at the moment. Stop and search should not be delivered in a different way for any one person. It should be delivered in a fair and transparent way, and there are clear set guidelines and parameters around this, all part of a legal framework within the police codes of practice that should be delivered. It is really clear that the bad use or the clumsy use, or actually the unlawful use of stop and search, has a really disenfranchising effect on the people that it's being used on inappropriately. And some of the examples that I've heard used there, such as somebody's walked out their front door and that's all the grounds that that person has used, that isn't acceptable. Actually, the officer has to have reasonable grounds, and we have a reasonable grounds panel that health checks this. So the old days of he smelled of cannabis or she smelled of cannabis, or there's a high crime area and they're known to be a criminal, those days need to be over, because they are unlawful stops and searches. So people should have reasonable grounds. So for example, if we receive a report of someone acting suspiciously and we find someone in that area and they are fitting the description, and there are a number of factors that come together, that may be reasonable grounds. But the first starting point is to talk and engage with that person who might actually have an innocent explanation for being there. Then we go on to, actually, are we going to exercise our powers? And at that point, the officer has a number of criteria that they have to deliver. So they have to tell the person the grounds for which they're stopping them, who they are, where they work, what power they're using. And I've seen some videos in my time where officers have said on YouTube and things, I don't have to tell you my powers. Yes, they do. It is all part of the legislation. Now, they must tell them where they can gain access to a copy of the form that they're using, because a lot of forces now are electronic and they do it on the electronic device. That actually comes with some real benefits, in that when I come to audit, I can tell exactly where that stop and search was. But also the powers that they're using need to be commensurate with what the police are trying to achieve. So, for example, if my officers are targeting burglary, I don't expect them to be stopping people and searching them for you smell of cannabis or you might have some weapons on you, because that's not what we're there to target. Because actually that's speculative and it doesn't fit within the spirit of the legislation. And it's that misuse of that power, or people using it in a way that is maybe classed as lawfully audacious, but actually it's unlawful. They should not be doing that. Now, what I can say to you, across the country, each force does things differently, but Northants Police are doing a full review of their stop and search. We have paused the training of officers on the request of the stop and search working group, so that we can engage and get best practice advice from some of the community groups. For example, we're asking for groups that are specialists in this. What do you think good training looks like? But actually, a lot of the community will tell you that training isn't the issue. This is about stereotypes and perceptions and those sorts of things. And actually, you could do all the training in the world, but if you can't change those perceptions, actually it isn't going to make any difference. So we're looking at that. Rumby is involved in the IAG. I'm very keen to work with Rumby, and we're already having discussions about how I can engage the youth in this, because it's the youth groups that are affected with this. If you look at stop and search and disproportionality, it's 17 to 24 years age group, which are the big numbers. So how do we get them to help influence policy? And I think Sarita and Maureen talked about in their messages on the screen, influencing policy and taking up key positions. Actually, Northants Police are recruiting at the moment, and there is a massive opportunity for people to come and influence from the inside. All they have to do is take that first step. Now, I've been in the police force now for 29 years. And when I joined the police force, my mum said to me, if you join the police force, I'm going to disown you. Now, that was based on years of mistrust. They came here in the 60s from India and didn't trust the police. My mum used to be, people used to shout at her and call her Aswad, the pop group, and she didn't know what that meant. But she'd come home to us. My brother, when he was a young child, was bullied at school, had a nervous breakdown, and was found under the stairs painting himself white because he thought that would make him okay. And my parents were dead against joining, because when they went to the police at that time, they were told, well, we can't really help you. Nobody's actually done anything. But actually, I was really, really committed to, I can only change this from the inside. And people can change this. We talked about earlier, is protesting just the answer? People have the right to peaceful protest, and there's no getting away from that. One of the concerns I've got is that the research suggests that minority groups are many times more likely to catch COVID and die from it. And I don't want people putting themselves at risk. But I understand that people feel like, well, enough's enough. I'd rather take that risk to protest. So we want to help facilitate that. But actually, getting involved in influencing policy has been suggested, sitting on the IAGs, helping us form youth groups, being involved with the stop and search working group and the reasonable ground scrutiny panel, actually joining the police in some form of post. We are still underrepresented by BAME groups. Northamptonshire's got a population of about 8.9. BAME, we're at 3.6, which isn't good enough. The doors are open, and the Chief Constable, Nick Adderley, is really, really keen to engage with the communities on this. And I'm helping advise him on some of this stuff, because actually I was born in Corby, and I was one of 3 black families in Corby. So you stood out like a sore thumb. And I remember, some of the things that have been said here. There was a girl who was at school with me called Violet, a black girl, and she used to get told, you're not Violet, you're black. And you just rolled with it. You got used to it. So, and you can see, I think it was, I've written it down here, when Hazel said, people feel hurt, and they can see what's gone on in America, and they feel that pain, and they relate to it, because it just reinforces all of the experiences and stereotypes they've had. So I am really keen to reform the way that we're doing stop and search. There is a disproportionality. I had some research done by the Open Source Foundation that in 2009, Northants Police were 10 times more likely to be stopped and searched if you were black. We've halved that number now, but half is still 5 times more likely. It's still not good enough. But the way we're going to change that is for the communities to engage with us and help us to understand and change that policy. One of the real good points that was raised by Jenny Campbell from Inspiration FM was, well, who designed your stop and search training? And actually, who designed it? It was a white guy in the training department that's got no idea what it feels like to be stopped and searched as a black person or a person from a BAME background. So what we've said is, we're going to stop that. And we're going to take some advice now from the community to understand what the real implications are of what we're doing and what we're trying to achieve, and how can we achieve it. Because if I'm being honest, we've tried and tried and tried at this, and we're still not getting it right. So why not go to the people that are disproportionately affected by it?
That's wonderful, and that it's really good to hear from the police as to what actions are being taken, and going back to the community to engage with them is one way forward, so that mindsets can change. As you've said, you can have as much training as you can have as much training, but where people have got stereotypes in their minds and they've already sort of made up their minds, it's very difficult to change that. But you can change it even with participation from BAME communities in the police force, working inside, helping with the training. So that's something that we can do as a community. We can be involved in that so that we can bring that forward. And I love the fact that you've experienced racism in your journey and been able to then make that change to go inside and work from within. Would you say, I just wanted to ask this before I hand over to Rumbi and Dalita and Benjamin to ask any questions that they've got. Would you say you've seen a significant change in how policing is being done from the time when you were younger to now? Have there been reforms that have worked, and is there hope?
I think there is hope. The one thing that I've seen in recent weeks that I've not seen in 29 years is that people are starting to stand up and listen. You may have seen Neil Basu, who's one of the most senior police officers from a BAME background, come out and give a very poignant blog this week about his experiences. When I joined 29 years ago, I remember coming home from training college. My sister had been attacked by her neighbours. They set fire to her gas meter outside. My brothers came out to defend her, and they got arrested. That case went through to court, and they were found not guilty. The neighbour was found guilty, and it all worked itself out. But actually, when we talk about those stereotypes, at that point in time, it was, well, they must have been involved rather than they were there defending themselves. Actually, a lot has changed. I spent 5 years as the hate crimes officer. I was a director of the Rights Equality Council with Anjona Roy and Paul Crofts. So I've had lots of involvement in this. But if you want my honest opinion, change across the country is slow. It's too slow, and it needs to gather a pace. We are trying to, in Northamptonshire, make sure it gathers that pace so that we are doing things in the way that the community would want us to. But I think that, and a classic example of this is when the OSF report was presented to the community, they were all very vociferous and quite angry about the findings, that it was 10 times more likely to be stopped and searched. And I asked them if they would help me, and I asked them to leave their name if they were willing to help. And at the end of the night, I had one name on the list. Now, when I asked people why was that, it's because the trust isn't there. And, you know, they haven't got that trust, and they've heard this before, and there must have been, you know, plenty of people that sit here saying what I'm saying over the years, and they're frustrated with it and they get fed up. So how do we build that trust? But actually, I can't agree any more positively with Sarita and Maureen that the way to change this is to influence policy and do things from the inside as well as the outside. Protest is fine, but I think, as was said earlier, you can't protest every day. At some point, there has to be other ways of doing it and getting those key positions, influencing policy. Now, there may be people out there that say, you know, I've got the qualifications, or perhaps I haven't got the qualifications. Now, my dad died when I was 13. I left school with no qualifications. I joined the police when I was 22. I worked my way up from a PC to a superintendent. The police force put me through a degree. All officers coming in now get put through a degree, so you can get a degree for free. They will help support you through that, and they are specifically looking to recruit people from we are looking to recruit people from minority communities, because we know that the best way to change this is to bring those people in and change it from the inside. So if anybody is interested, thinking about it, I'm really keen to hear from them. If they feel that we can influence this in other ways, I would really be keen to hear about that. Rumbi has got my contact numbers and details. I'm more than happy for those to be shared, so that actually we can draw on the support. We're not going to change this on our own. We've been trying to change this on our own in our way. Actually, this is about engaging with the right communities and them telling us how this needs to change, and us working with them rather than doing unto communities in a way that we think is right.
Wonderful. That's great. That's excellent. Thank you so much. And if there is anyone who's listening, who maybe Rumbi, you can share the details in the comments, so that people can get in touch with their views, with suggestions, and also for people who want to apply, where would they go? Where are the website that they can look on for the jobs that are out at the moment?
They can go on the website, but if Rumbi wants to share my email address, I'm more than happy that if they drop me an email, I am happy to signpost them to the right location, give them any advice. Clearly, if I get thousands, it may take me some time to respond. But actually, whereas before, and we accept that there are some people who English isn't their first language, there are support mechanisms in place now to get the right candidates in and give them the support they need on a bespoke basis, rather than saying that's our process. They're the sorts of things that we're changing where we went wrong before. We want to get this right.
That's excellent. That's really good. So Rumbi will share those out. Did you ladies have any questions?
Yes, I do. I just wanted to ask, there's a term that goes around regarding minorities, that we are a hard to reach group. That baffles me, because we are in the same communities, I guess, where the natives are. So why are we considered hard to reach? And what efforts can be done by the police? I know you've come out of hours and stuff, but what efforts can be done by the police to ensure that we're not considered as hard to reach? Because I don't think we're hard to reach at all. There's so many places that we congregate in, that you can get hold of us, knowing so many, they're influential people within communities, I think. So why is that term like bantered around, that we are hard to reach?
Do you know, I've heard this term for as long as I've been in the police service, and actually I think that there's a perception of hard to reach because they are hard to reach in the ways that people think they should be reaching them. So, for example, if you look at the stop and search working groups and some of the interaction, we would historically hold them at a police station or police headquarters and invite a community that perhaps hasn't got the trust that we would want to come and visit us at the police station, and then wonder why nobody turned up. When actually, how easy would it have been to go to the African Caribbean Center or the Hindu temple or the Muslim mosque to engage with people in their own comfort and ask them the ways that they want us to engage? I think we've made it hard to reach, and it's a term that actually is out of date, because like now, I've made one phone call to you, Rumbi, and you are falling over yourself to say the youth want to engage with you, and they want to change things. And how can we do this? That wasn't that hard for me, but we seem to be putting barriers in the way that aren't there, and that needs to change.
That's true. That's great. And yeah, we and it's new ways of doing things, isn't it? So that will enable the authorities to be able to reach our communities, and our communities are very open and very receptive as well, to learn, to change ways of how we do things, so that we're able to acculturate and integrate as well. So that's really that's true. Dalito, did you have anything you wanted to say as a final question before we release Superintendent?
No, I've got no questions.
There is just one question from Jane, who said, she asked a question that, did you say that one can be stopped and searched if his or her looks are matching the looks? And what happens if one is not the culprit?
Yes, but it has to be a bit more than that. It can't just be you fit the description of somebody who committed a burglary, for example. There has to be additional things like it's near the burglary, it's in the area that the offence happened, that somebody's described that person or pointed them out. Now, the idea of this is, and this is why I say the engage phase is really important. The whole purpose that stop and search was brought in was to prevent the unnecessary arrest or detention of somebody in the street. Now, what the first stage of that is to ask them a question. They might have a totally reasonable explanation for being there. And what I wouldn't expect to see is somebody's described as wearing a white shirt with police epaulets, and they're 4 miles away and going, "Oh, you fit the description of a burglary that happened 4 miles away." That just isn't reasonable. Likewise, with the discussion about the females on a train, the guidelines are quite strict about this. People, if it's absolutely necessary, and I mean absolutely necessary, then you can search the main outer pockets and turn out your pockets or whatever for a male officer to a female. But actually, if they're a juvenile and they are female, what's the rush? If they needed to get an appropriate adult there or make a phone call to get somebody there, they can do all of those things. Actually, there's no rush to this, and it's that sort of, and I use the term, clumsy use of these powers that are upsetting the community, and the trust isn't there. We need to get that trust back. We need to get involved with the communities so that they can have a say in this and don't feel like they are being done unto. And there is no doubt about it now. If you look at our priorities meeting, where I have to decide every 2 weeks what are our priorities, one of the things that we've introduced is we discuss, is what we're about to do going to disproportionately affect any community? So if we're looking at drug supply, actually, if we're looking at drug supply, I expect the grounds for that search to be for drugs. But if we're looking at knife crime, I don't expect people to be getting searched for drugs or use smell of cannabis or whatever. I expect them to be searched for weapons to be used in violence. And it's all of those checks and balances that we're putting in place now in auditable minutes, that people like Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary can come in and check that are we doing what we've promised. And then I have to present those sorts of things to the Stop and Search Working Group and the Reasonable Grounds Panel, which has the community members on it. So it has people like the Rights Equality Council on it. It has Inspiration FM on it, and various members of the community that can provide that independent accountability to say, we agree with that or we don't, and we think it's disproportionate.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much. And just before we're going to finish now, because I've kept you guys for a long time, and I'm so grateful. I really value your time. Rumbi McCoy just had one more question, you said, isn't it?
Yeah, just wearing my HR hat on, Superintendent. What measures do you have in place for officers who consistently, do a stop and search that's not within the framework? Because I think some of the young men that I work with, they would really like to know that there is that reassurance that there are systems in place once they've been stopped and searched. If it's not within the framework, they are made accountable, because young people are being made accountable on the streets. So what's in place for the officers?
I think it's a really good question. That's exactly the reason why we brought the Reasonable Grounds Panel in. We bring in members of the community, and it's different members each time, that do dip samples and reality testing of stop and searches. So we will at random, and they can pick them, so it's not us picking our own work to be marked, stop and search, where they review the stop and search, the grounds, and the body-worn video, so that they can see, without any specialist training, and they don't need to be specialist trained, would the average person say that stop and search was a good stop and search or not? Now, at a time when we first introduced that panel, Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary came in and found that 100% of them were either the grounds were recorded inappropriately or there was something that wasn't right about it. We redesigned the way we did our forms. We introduced the reasonable grounds panel, and the reasonable grounds panel, within a short amount of time, got that standard up to 100% that held up to scrutiny. Now, what happened with that to go on that journey was that if they had one, they were given words of advice. If they had two, they had to come and see a senior leader. And if they had three, then their powers were temporarily removed to do a stop and search until they had undertaken intensive training. And then the worst case sanction is that actually, if they've done something which might be classed as unlawful, that they breach the standards of professional behaviour and they are taken to a disciplinary hearing where actually if they've done something wrong. So, for example, Northants Police's policy is every single stop and search must be on body-worn camera.
Yeah.
So if an officer's not on body-worn camera, when they've done a search and we dip sample, the first thing they will get is an email to them and their sergeant to come and explain to me why they have not turned on their body-worn camera for that particular instant. Now, sometimes there is the odd occasion where it's an innocent explanation where they've been bounced from job to job to job and their camera's been on a lot and it's run out of battery. But actually, we're now saying to them, we're fitting devices to the car where you can charge your body-worn camera as you go round. So those excuses are no longer going to be viable. So in the worst case scenario, to answer your question, if an officer did not do what the Chief Constable's force policy said, which is you will have body-worn video on, you will comply with these standards, they could be taken to a hearing for gross misconduct and dismissed.
That's great, and that's good to know that there is, there's consequences. And what about people who record videos, like when they're being stopped and searched? Are those used in evidence? Are they? Would that be used by the police to investigate further when someone has taken a video of an unlawful stop and search?
Absolutely. I mean, if you look at it now, any evidence like that, if somebody made a complaint, then the Professional Standards Department would take that into account. We're in a society now where everything's on video, isn't it? Whether you're walking down the street or somebody's got a camera, and sometimes that's helpful. And sometimes it gets people, not just police, anybody into trouble because they've either tweeted something that they wish they hadn't or done something like that. But what they won't do as standard is, what the officer shouldn't be doing is, if somebody's filming them, the officer hasn't got the right to say that may be evidenced and seize the camera or seize the phone. Actually, there are procedures where they need to inform the person that actually we believe that may contain evidence and therefore we ask you not to dispose of it. This bit about you filmed me, so I'm going to seize your camera, which we've seen on YouTube in the past, actually is not something that should be happening. The public can film officers if they want to film them. There is no issue with that, and officers that take exception to it have to get used to it. That is the way of the modern world, and the public are doing nothing wrong if they choose to do that.
Wonderful. That's great. That's wonderful. So thank you so much, everyone who's come on and shared your views and shared your experiences. And thank you, Superintendent, for coming on out of hours and speaking to us. And I think that's been really informative. And we will share this video around so that many people will hear the information. And just watch out for your inbox, because you're probably gonna have lots of emails. But
I really hope I do. If you're going to email me, whether it's about joining the police, helping in some way, please engage with us. We want to work with you. And actually, I've got some ideas around stop and search working groups, around a youth panel. But tell me what your ideas are. Tell me what you think would work. Our chief is really keen to start up a working group that advises him as a chief constable from members of the community about how he, as a leader of an organization of over 2,000 people, can get this right. And actually, he can also influence national policing policy through the National Police Chiefs Council. So it's an opportunity that I think is a golden opportunity. Please take it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Please share the video, email Superintendent Murray, and get involved. That's the only way that we can make change, by getting involved. So thank you so much. Thank you, Rumbi. Thank you, Dalitso, Benjamin, Hazel, and Rumbi. And Rumbi and Tasha. Thank you so much. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Wonderful. Thank you. Oh, everyone's gone off. End my burp.